Have you ever felt drawn to something that deep down you knew was a bad idea? Like a quiet voice in the back of your mind, urging you forward, even when every instinct screams to stop. That's how it was for us last Halloween. It started as a typical Halloween night in the town of Crestview. The sky was clear, the bonfires lit, and the streets filled with kids in costumes, running around with candy bags, their laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. For most, Halloween was a time of fun, a night to tell harmless ghost stories and eat too much candy. But for us, it was the night that changed everything. We'd heard the stories about the mountain everyone had. The townspeople called it the Watcher's Eye, a name whispered around the bonfires like a dark secret. They said the mountain was alive, that it had an eye buried somewhere deep within it, watching, waiting. Every year on Halloween, the people of Crestview lit bonfires at the base of the mountain as part of an old tradition, one that no one really questioned anymore. They said the fire kept the eye closed, kept it from looking at the town, from noticing us. We didn't believe it, of course. Not really. We were there to film the town's quirky customs for a documentary, to capture the Halloween festivities and share them with the world. But then someone I'll never forgive, dared us to climb. It was supposed to be a joke, just another Halloween dare to break the monotony of filming the same old bonfires and costumes. But as we sat around the fire, drinking cheap beer and laughing off the town's superstitions, the idea started to take hold. What if we went up the mountain? What if we filmed it? No one else had done it. We could be the first to capture the eye, to see what really lay beyond the fog and shadows of the peak. It's just a stupid legend, Sarah, our director, had said, a smirk tugging at her lips. Come on, we're supposed to be documenting the truth, right? Let's give them something real. I should have said no. We all should have. But instead, we packed up our gear, laughed off the unease, and made our way toward the trail. We started the climb just before midnight, the trailhead barely visible in the dim light of our flashlights. The air was colder up there, the trees thicker, casting long shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking. At first, it felt like an adventure, the rush of doing something forbidden, the thrill of the unknown. But the further we went, the more that excitement faded, replaced by a quiet dread that none of us wanted to admit was growing. Liam, our local guide, led the way, though he wasn't happy about it. He'd grown up in Crestview, and even though he laughed at the legends like we did, there was something about his body language, something tense and uneasy. His shoulders were stiff, his eyes constantly scanning the trail like he was expecting something to jump out at us. "I've been up here before," Liam said, his voice low. "Not on Halloween, though. There's something about this night. The mountain feels different." We didn't ask him what he meant by that. I think none of us wanted to hear the answer. An hour into the climb, things started to feel strange. The air grew thick, like we were walking through water, every step heavier than the last. Our flashlights began to flicker, and the usual sounds of the forest, crickets, wind, the rustle of leaves, fell silent. It was as if the mountain itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Joel, our cameraman, was the first to notice the figures. Shadowy shapes moving just out of sight, weaving between the trees. At first, we thought it was just our imagination, tricks of the light playing on our nerves. But then he caught something on film. "Look," Joel whispered, his voice shaking as he replayed the footage. "There. See that? There's someone out there." We huddled around the camera, staring at the grainy screen. There, for just a moment, was a dark figure, standing perfectly still between two trees, watching us. The second the light hit it, it vanished. "It's nothing," Sarah said, though I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Just a shadow." But it didn't feel like just a shadow, not anymore. The higher we climbed, the worse it got. The air was colder, the wind stronger, howling through the trees like it carried voices on the breeze. And then we saw it. A glow, faint at first, but growing stronger as we neared the summit. It wasn't the moon or the stars or anything natural. It was something else, something alive. "That's it," Liam said, stopping dead in his tracks. His face had gone pale. "That's the eye." It was a massive, glowing orb high above us, pulsing with a strange rhythmic light, like it was breathing, watching. "We need to go back," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "This isn't right. We shouldn't be here." But Sarah wasn't listening. She had her camera trained on the eye, her eyes wide with something that looked too much like awe. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what we came for." Joel, though hesitant, lifted his camera and started filming. The rest of us stood frozen, the weight of the mountain pressing down on us. The eye wasn't just watching, it was pulling. I could feel it in my bones, in my mind, something probing, searching, looking for something to latch onto. Then, without warning, the ground trembled. Rocks tumbled down the side of the trail, and a low, deep sound rumbled from the depths of the mountain, like a growl. The eye flared brighter, casting long shadows that danced wildly across the landscape. We turned to run, but it was too late. "Wait!" Joel shouted, his voice cracking. "Where's Liam?" We spun around, but Liam was gone. 1 second, he'd been standing right next to us. The next, he was just gone. His flashlight lay on the ground, still on, casting a dim, shaky beam into the trees. Panic set in. We called his name over and over, but all we got in return was silence. Thick, oppressive silence, as if the mountain itself had swallowed him whole. "We have to go back," Arya, our sound tech, said, her voice trembling. "We can't stay here. We need to leave now." But the trail, it wasn't the same. The way we came up was gone, replaced by unfamiliar twists and turns that hadn't been there before. The mountain had shifted, trapping us. "The eye," Sarah whispered, her face pale. "It's real." We were in its grip now, and it wasn't going to let us go. The eye grew stronger with every step we took, its light pulsing, burning into the back of our minds. I could feel it in my thoughts, digging, searching for something deep inside me. My worst fears, my darkest desires. It knew them all, and it was using them against me. As we stumbled forward, trying to find any way down, I started seeing things. Shadows flickering in the corners of my vision, whispers in the wind that sounded like my name. The others saw them too, but no one wanted to admit it. "We're not alone up here," Joel muttered, his eyes darting around. "There's something following us." He was right. We weren't alone. But whatever was out there wasn't human. It was the mountain itself. The eye had seen us, and now it was playing with us. The eye was everywhere. Every time I blinked, I saw its light behind my eyelids, pulsing, watching. I felt it tugging at something deep inside me, my mind, my thoughts. The further we went, the more disoriented I became, like the world around me was unraveling, and I wasn't the only one. "We're lost," Joel muttered, his voice strained as he scanned the path ahead, which seemed to stretch on forever. "This trail, it wasn't this long before. We should have been back by now." Sarah shook her head, though she couldn't hide the uncertainty in her eyes. "We just have to keep moving. The path will take us down eventually. It has to." But it didn't feel like that. The trail twisted and turned in ways it hadn't on the way up, as if the mountain was shifting beneath our feet, changing the landscape as we moved. Trees bent at odd angles, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, and every now and then I thought I saw movement in the fog. A figure, maybe, just beyond the tree line. But whenever I turned to look, it vanished. We didn't talk much after that. We couldn't. There was a heaviness in the air, a pressure that made it hard to think, let alone speak. The only sound was the crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional snap of a twig that sent all of us whipping our heads around. And then there was the light, the eye. It wasn't gone. No matter how far we walked, no matter how much we tried to escape it, the glow still lingered in the distance, faint, but always there, like it was following us. It happened suddenly, without warning. 1 second, we were walking in silence. The next, Arya screamed. I spun around, my heart racing, and saw her staring at her arm, her eyes wide with terror. She held out her wrist, and I saw it. The mark. It was faint, but unmistakable, a strange circular symbol, like the ones we had seen etched into the rocks near the old campsite earlier. Except now it was on her skin, glowing faintly with the same light as the eye. What is this? She stammered, her voice shaking as she rubbed at the mark, trying to make it disappear, but it wouldn't go away. Sarah stepped forward, trying to stay calm. It's nothing. It's nothing. Maybe it's some kind of reaction from the mountain. But we all knew that wasn't true. It was the eye. It had marked her. Joel backed away, shaking his head. We need to leave. Now this place isn't right. We should have never come up here. We will, Sarah snapped, though I could hear the fear in her voice. We just need to keep going. We'll be out of here soon. But even as she said it, I knew she didn't believe it. None of us did. We pressed on, but things only got worse. Time felt wrong, like it was slipping away from us. Hours passed, but the sky never changed. The sun never rose, nor did it fully set. It was stuck in this perpetual twilight, casting long shadows that twisted and warped the landscape around us. Joel was the first to lose it. He started muttering under his breath, his eyes darting around like he was seeing things the rest of us couldn't. They're watching us, he whispered, his voice frantic. They're everywhere. Don't you see them? The shadows, the faces, they're watching. At first, we thought he was just scared, paranoid from the pressure of the climb, the fear of being lost. But then we saw it too, the shadows, they moved. At first, it was subtle, like a trick of the light, but soon it became clear. The shadows weren't just shadows. They were figures shifting in the fog, watching us from the edges of the trees, always there, just out of reach. Who are they? Arya whispered, her eyes wide as she stared into the fog. What do they want? They're not real, Sarah said, her voice tight. It's just the mountain playing tricks on us. We're all tired. We need to stay focused. But the shadows were real, and they were getting closer. The next thing we noticed was the path, or rather, the lack of it. 1 second, we were walking along the trail, the ground firm beneath our feet. The next, it was gone, just like that. The dirt had shifted, the trail swallowed by the mountain, replaced by thick, tangled roots and jagged rocks. We were stranded. No way forward, no way back. This doesn't make sense, Joel stammered, his voice rising in panic. There was a path. There was. Where did it go? Sarah took a deep breath, trying to keep calm, though her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the trail. We must have missed a turn. We'll backtrack, find the right way. But as we turned, we realized something horrifying. The way we had come was different. The trees were in the wrong places, the rocks unfamiliar. It was like the mountain had shifted while we weren't looking, rearranging itself to keep us trapped. The eye was doing this. It was watching, waiting, playing with us. The pressure in my chest grew heavier, suffocating, as if the very air around us was turning solid. I could feel the eye in my head now, more than just a distant glow. It was inside me, rooting through my thoughts, dragging up memories I'd long buried. I stumbled, clutching my head as a flood of images flashed before my eyes. Moments from my childhood, faces of people I hadn't thought about in years. And then, darker things, fears I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The feeling of being alone, of being forgotten, of losing everything I cared about. No, stop, I muttered, gripping the sides of my head as if that would make it go away. But it didn't. The eye kept digging, searching, pulling. The others were feeling it too. Sarah's eyes were wide, darting around as if she was trying to block out whatever the eye was showing her. Arya was crying, whispering something about her family. Joel had gone silent, his face pale and blank as he stared ahead, his eyes unfocused. We were losing ourselves, and the eye wasn't done yet. It happened fast, too fast. Joel, who had been silent for the past hour, suddenly turned to face us, his eyes wide, wild. I get it now, he whispered, a crazed smile creeping across his face. I know what it wants. We've been fighting it, but that's the problem. We need to give in. We need to ask. What are you talking about? Sarah snapped, taking a step back from him. We're not asking for anything. We're getting out of here. But Joel wasn't listening. He took a step toward the glow of the eye, his hands trembling. I know what I want, he said, his voice shaky but filled with a strange conviction. I want to understand. I want to see everything, to know everything. Joel, no! I shouted, lunging forward to stop him, but it was too late. The second the words left his mouth, the eye flared brighter, its light enveloping him, blinding us all. I heard Joel scream, a high-pitched, gut-wrenching sound as his body convulsed, his eyes rolling back in his head. He dropped to the ground, twitching, his hands clawing at his skull. And then, silence. When the light dimmed, Joel lay still, his body limp, his eyes staring blankly at the sky, blood trickling from his nose and ears. He was gone. We stood there, frozen, staring at Joel's lifeless body, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on us like a physical force. The eye had taken him, and it wasn't done. We need to leave, Arya whispered, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. We need to get out of here, now. But I knew, deep down, that there was no escape. Not anymore. The eye had seen us, marked us. It wanted something. And it wasn't going to let us leave until it got what it wanted. I could feel it pulling at me again, whispering in my mind, tempting me with promises of everything I'd ever wanted. But I couldn't give in, not like Joel. Don't wish, I whispered to myself, trying to hold on to that one thought. Don't ask, don't let it in. But the mountain wasn't letting us go, and the eye was still watching. Joel's body lay motionless in front of us, his face frozen in that awful, twisted expression of fear and something else. Whatever he'd seen, whatever the eye had shown him, had broken him. He thought he could handle it. He thought he wanted the truth. But the eye doesn't give you what you think you want. It digs deeper. Arya knelt beside him, sobbing, her hands hovering over his body, but too scared to touch him. Sarah stood back, her face pale and stiff, eyes darting between Joel and the glowing light in the distance. As for me, I was paralyzed, trying to push back the feeling crawling up my spine. This cold, creeping certainty that the eye wasn't finished with us. We need to move, I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. We can't stay here. It'll take us next if we don't go now. Arya looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Where do we go? The path's gone. There's no way down. I didn't have an answer, not a good one anyway. But the longer we stood there, the more the mountain seemed to press in around us. The trees shifted, their branches hanging lower, as if reaching for us. The air felt thick, like the weight of the eye's gaze was physically bearing down on us. It wasn't just watching, it was waiting. "We'll find a way," Sarah snapped, snapping out of her daze. "There's always a way down." But there wasn't, not anymore. We left Joel behind. I hated myself for it, but what choice did we have? Arya kept glancing back, her face twisted with guilt, but she stayed close to me as we moved. Sarah took the lead, though I could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't as sure of herself as she pretended to be. The light of the eye flickered behind us, growing fainter with every step, but its presence never left. It was like a buzzing in the back of my skull, always there, probing, searching for something to latch onto. We walked for hours, at least it felt like hours, but no matter how far we went, we didn't make any progress. The path was gone, swallowed by the mountain, and the trees seemed to shift around us, their branches forming walls, blocking us in. "It's like we're walking in circles," Arya muttered, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "We're never getting out of here." "Shut up," Sarah snapped, her voice tight. "We're not lost. We just need to—" Her words were cut off by a sharp crack in the distance. We all froze, our breath catching in our throats. The sound echoed through the trees, growing louder, closer. Something was moving, something big. "What the hell is that?" Arya whispered, her hand gripping my arm. I didn't answer. I didn't know. But whatever it wasn't human. The air grew colder, the ground harder beneath our feet as we moved deeper into the forest. The noise followed us, always just behind, but no matter how much we turned, we couldn't see anything. Only shadows, only fog. And then, in the distance, we saw it. A figure, tall and thin, standing perfectly still between the trees. Sarah raised her flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the fog, but the figure didn't move. I squinted, trying to make out its features, but it was too far, too shadowed. What is that?" Arya asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. But something in me told me to run, to get as far away from it as possible. The eye had shown us our fears, our desires. And now it was showing us something else. Something twisted. The figure shifted, just slightly, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a person, it was something else. A part of the mountain. I could feel it. Sarah took a step back, her breath shallow. "We need to keep moving. Don't look at it, just keep moving." And so we did. We kept walking, our eyes forward, our breaths held. But the figure remained in the corner of my vision, following, always just out of reach. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a clearing. The trees parted, and the sky above us glowed faintly, the light of the eye dim, but still present, still watching. The air was thick with tension, the silence pressing down on us like a physical weight. And then, it spoke. The voice wasn't loud, it wasn't even clear at first. It was more like a whisper carried on the wind, threading through the branches. But I could hear it. I could feel it. The words curled around me, soft and seductive, pulling at the corners of my mind. "What do you want?" The voice was everywhere and nowhere, inside my head and outside it. The words sank into my thoughts, burrowing deep, looking for something to latch onto. I shook my head, trying to clear it, but the voice only grew stronger, more insistent. "What do you want?" Arya stumbled, clutching her head. "Make it stop," she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. "Make it stop, please." I grabbed her arm, pulling her close, trying to block out the voice, but it was everywhere, swirling around us, wrapping us in its grip. "I can give it to you," the voice whispered, smooth and sweet. "Anything you desire, just ask." I clenched my fists, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel it, the temptation, the pull. The eye was offering us everything we wanted, but I knew it was a lie. I'd seen what happened to Joel. I knew what the eye really wanted. Don't listen to it, I whispered, my voice hoarse. Don't ask for anything. But it was too late. Arya had been quiet for too long, her breathing shallow, her eyes glazed over. And then she whispered the words I'd been dreading. I just want to see them again, she murmured, her voice soft and broken. My family. I just want to see them. My blood turned to ice. No, I said, grabbing her shoulders, shaking her. Arya, no, don't. But the words were already out, and the eye was listening. The light flared, brighter than before, blinding us. I heard Arya scream, a sharp, panicked sound that cut through the air like a knife. I reached for her, but she was gone, pulled into the light, her body dissolving into the glow. Arya! I shouted, stumbling forward, but there was nothing but the light. And then, silence. She was gone, just like Joel, just like Liam. Sarah stood frozen, her face pale and stricken, her eyes wide with terror. We were the only ones left, and the eye wasn't done with us. The voice whispered again, soft and insistent. What do you want? I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stand there, frozen in place, the weight of the eye pressing down on me, pulling at my thoughts, my desires. But I knew better now. I couldn't ask. I couldn't give in. I had to fight it. I had to resist. Don't wish, I whispered to myself, over and over again, like a mantra. Don't ask. Don't give it what it wants. But the mountain was closing in. The eye was still watching, and it wasn't going to let us go until it had everything.